Roselyn Adjei had always been used to order. Her life was built on precision, schedules, and decisions that left no room for mistakes. That was the discipline her father had raised her with, long before he passed away and left behind not only his empire, but also the weight of expectation resting squarely on her shoulders. As the CEO of Adjei Holdings, one of the most respected companies in Accra, Roselyn commanded boardrooms with elegance. Her name alone opened doors, silenced opposition, and inspired admiration. She was young, brilliant, and composed, everything society expected a woman of her status to be. Yet, on the day she returned from her overseas business trip, something as simple as a luggage mix-up began to unravel the perfectly arranged threads of her life. The Kotoka International Airport buzzed with activity. Travelers hurried across the terminal, voices overlapping, suitcases rolling, announcements echoing overhead. Roselyn adjusted the strap of her handbag on her shoulder as she stood beside the baggage carousel, her eyes fixed on the moving belt. She spotted her familiar navy blue suitcase and pulled it off effortlessly. Without much thought, she made her way toward the exit, already mentally reviewing the list of meetings waiting for her the next morning. It wasn't until she reached her driveway and attempted to unlock the suitcase that she realized something was wrong. The lock refused to open. Frowning, she tried again. Still nothing. That was when she noticed the small sticker on the handle, one she didn't recognize. Her heart skipped. "This is not my luggage," she muttered. Annoyance quickly replaced surprise. She immediately called her assistant, who directed her to the airport's Lost and Found office. After a few calls, the manager confirmed that another passenger had reported the same issue. "His name is Osteine Adjei-Mensah," the manager explained over the phone. "He seems quite cooperative and willing to bring your luggage to you personally." Roselyn hesitated. She wasn't accustomed to dealing with strangers on personal matters, but practicality won. "Fine," she said calmly. "Send him my address." Less than an hour later, a silver car pulled up in front of her house. From her living room window, she watched as the driver stepped out. He was tall, casually dressed, with an easy confidence in the way he moved. Not arrogant, just relaxed, the kind of man who didn't seem burdened by the world. The doorbell rang. Roselyn opened the door, maintaining her usual composed expression. "Yes?" Osteine smiled politely. "I believe we accidentally swapped lives for a few hours," he said, lifting her suitcase slightly. Despite herself, she almost laughed. They exchanged luggage and confirmed everything was intact. It should have ended there, just a simple mistake resolved. But when Roselyn checked her phone, the battery was dead. She sighed softly. "My driver won't arrive for another hour, and my phone just died." Osteine glanced toward his car. "You can charge it in my car if you want. It'll only take a few minutes." Every instinct in her usually rejected such offers, but something about his calm demeanor didn't feel threatening. "All right," she agreed. They sat in his car, her phone plugged into the charger. A silence settled between them, not awkward, just unfamiliar. Osteine broke it gently. "So you just returned today?" "Yes, from London." "Work trip?" "Always," she replied. He smiled faintly. "That sounds exhausting." "It is." He hesitated, then added, "Well, I guess I should say happy birthday." She turned sharply at him. "How did you know?" He chuckled and lifted his own suitcase slightly. "Your diary fell out when I opened it earlier. I didn't read it, but the front page said, 'Birthday Week Goals.'" Roselyn blinked, then surprised herself by laughing. "It's fine," she said softly. "And thank you." On impulse, Osteine suggested they get a drink nearby. "Just one," he insisted, "a small toast, to your birthday, and to fate's strange sense of humor." Roselyn almost declined. Almost. But maybe it was the exhaustion, or loneliness, or simply the rare feeling of being treated as a normal woman instead of a powerful executive. "1 drink," she agreed. That single drink turned into laughter, then conversations, then stories. For the first time in a long while, Roselyn felt light. The night blurred gently after that, not in detail, but in feeling. Trust, vulnerability. 2 strangers drawn together by accident, surrendering briefly to the moment. When morning came, reality returned. They parted quietly, exchanging numbers. No promises, no expectations, just an unspoken acknowledgement that something had happened, something neither fully understood. Roselyn told herself it was over, a fleeting encounter. She had no idea fate was only getting started.
Roselyn woke to sunlight filtering through sheer curtains, the quiet hum of Accra's morning traffic drifting faintly into her bedroom. For a few seconds she lay still, disoriented by the unfamiliar heaviness in her head and the strange tenderness in her chest. Then memory returned, not in sharp images, but in fragments. Laughter, conversation, a car parked under the amber glow of a streetlight, 2 people sharing vulnerability they hadn't planned to share. She sat up slowly, pressing her palm against her forehead. "Roselyn Adjei, what have you done?" she whispered to herself. It wasn't guilt exactly. It was confusion. Her life had always been predictable, controlled. She did not make impulsive choices. She did not get swept into moments, and she certainly did not let strangers get close enough to matter. Yet somehow, Osteine had. She glanced at her phone on the bedside table. Several missed calls from her assistant, dozens of unread messages. The world had kept moving while she had allowed herself one night of irresponsibility. She showered, dressed in a crisp white blouse and tailored trousers, and stared at her reflection in the mirror. The woman looking back at her was the same powerful CEO the world knew, but behind her eyes was something softer now, something unsettled. Her phone buzzed again. This time a new message appeared on the screen. Osteine. "Good morning, Roselyn. I hope you got home safely." She stared at the message longer than necessary. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. She typed a response, deleted it, typed another, deleted that too. Why did a simple message feel so complicated? Eventually, she settled on something safe. "Rosalind, I did, thank you. I hope you're well too." The reply came quickly. "I am, and I just wanted to say thank you for yesterday. It was unexpected, but I'm glad it happened." Her chest tightened in a way she didn't fully understand. "It was unexpected indeed. I appreciate your honesty." She set the phone down after that, unwilling to continue a conversation she wasn't sure she knew how to manage. She needed distance, control, structure. By the time she arrived at the office, she had successfully locked the night away behind her professional mask. "Welcome back, ma'am," her assistant Afia greeted warmly. "We missed you." "Thank you, Afia," Roselyn replied, walking briskly toward her office. "Please reschedule the board meeting for 2 p.m. I need time to review the reports." "As you wish." Work, thankfully, was familiar territory. Spreadsheets, negotiations, strategy sessions. The company needed her focus, and she gave it willingly. But no matter how deeply she buried herself in documents, her mind kept wandering back to that unexpected connection. The way Osteine had listened when she spoke. The way he hadn't seemed impressed by her status. The way for one evening she had simply been Roselyn, not Madam CEO. By the end of the day, she was exhausted in a way sleep alone could not fix. Across town, Osteine sat on the balcony of his modest apartment, staring at the city skyline with thoughts he couldn't quite organize. He hadn't expected to meet someone like Roselyn. He definitely hadn't expected to feel affected. He was used to short-lived connections, surface-level conversations, relationships that burned brightly but quickly lost meaning. His recent breakup with his girlfriend, Ya, had left him emotionally tired, even though he knew ending things was necessary. But Roselyn was different. She didn't try to impress. She didn't overshare. She didn't pretend. There was depth behind her calm, and it intrigued him more than he wanted to admit. He checked his phone again, rereading their short exchange. Her responses were polite, controlled, distant. He sighed. "Of course," he murmured. "What did I expect?" He reminded himself that their encounter had been accidental, temporary, a strange twist of fate that would probably fade into memory. And yet he couldn't shake the feeling that their story wasn't over. Weeks passed. Life resumed its rhythm for Roselyn. Board meetings, charity events, business lunches. The world once again saw her as the composed heiress who had everything under control. But beneath the surface, something had shifted. She felt more tired than usual. Food she normally enjoyed suddenly made her nauseous. The smell of strong coffee, once her lifeline, now turned her stomach. And first she blamed stress. "You need to rest more, Afia," Afia advised one afternoon. "You've been working too hard." Roselyn nodded absently. "Perhaps." But when dizziness hit her during a presentation and she had to excuse herself, concern replaced denial. Later that evening, she sat alone in her bedroom, staring at a small stick in her trembling hand. 2 lines. Clear. Undeniable. Her breath caught. No, this can't be," she whispered. But the evidence refused to disappear. Pregnant. The word echoed in her mind, heavy with consequence. She sank onto the edge of the bed, emotions swirling. Fear, disbelief, uncertainty. She had built her life around control, and now her body had made a decision without consulting her plans. There was only one person who needed to know. Her fingers moved slowly as she searched for Ostaine's contact. It had been weeks since they last spoke. She had told herself it was for the best, that distance meant safety. Now, distance felt impossible. "Roselyn. Osteine. We need to talk." The reply didn't come immediately. Minutes stretched like hours. Finally, her phone buzzed. "Osteine." "Hi, Roselyn. Is everything okay?" She swallowed hard, then typed words that changed everything. "I'm pregnant." The screen remained still. No typing indicator. No response. Just silence. And in that silence, doubt began to grow.
The silence after Roselyn's message was louder than any boardroom argument she had ever endured. She sat on the edge of her bed, phone in hand, eyes fixed on the screen as though staring long enough might force a response to appear. Her room felt suddenly too big, too quiet, too unfamiliar. Every second that passed without a reply tightened something in her chest. She refreshed the screen. Nothing. "Maybe he's busy," she whispered, though her voice lacked conviction. Roselyn had faced hostile investors, media scandals, and corporate sabotage without flinching. Yet now she felt stripped of that strength, exposed by a truth she hadn't planned for. Her phone buzzed at last. Her breath caught as she opened the message. "Osteine. I'm sorry? What?" Her heart sank slightly, not because of the confusion, but because of the distance in his tone. She typed carefully. "Roselyn. I've confirmed it medically. I wouldn't tell you if I wasn't sure." There was another pause, this one longer. Minutes passed, then more. Finally, his reply arrived. "Osteine. Roselyn, Are you certain this is mine?" The words felt like a slap. She stared at them, disbelief and hurt flooding through her. She hadn't expected immediate joy, she wasn't naive, but she hadn't expected doubt either. "Roselyn, you are the only person I've been with. There is no confusion."
The typing indicator appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Osteine, this is just a lot. We barely know each other. This doesn't make sense. Her fingers trembled slightly as she typed her response. Rosalind, I know it's unexpected, but this is real, and I thought you deserved to know. This time, he didn't reply at all. The screen went dark. Rosalind sat there long after the conversation ended, her mind replaying every word. She hadn't asked him for anything. Not support, not commitment, not promises. She had only given him the truth. And still, it felt like rejection. Across town, Osteine paced the length of his small living room, phone in hand, unread notifications lighting up the screen. Pregnant. The word echoed in his head like a drumbeat he couldn't silence. He sank onto the couch, dragging a hand down his face. This can't be happening, he muttered. It wasn't that Rosalind was lying. Deep down, he knew she wasn't that kind of person. But fear had a way of twisting logic, of making responsibility feel like a threat rather than a reality. He had spent most of his life avoiding permanence. His relationship with Ya had ended precisely because she had begun talking about the future, marriage, children, settling down. He had panicked then, convincing himself he wasn't ready. And now, here he was, facing the very thing he'd spent years running from. He picked up his phone again and read Rosalind's last message. I thought you deserved to know. Guilt crept in slowly, unwelcome but undeniable. She hadn't accused him. She hadn't demanded anything. She had simply trusted him with something life-altering. And his response? Doubt. He exhaled sharply. You messed this up, he admitted quietly to himself. Days turned into weeks. Rosalind didn't reach out again. She threw herself back into work with a ferocity that worried those around her. She arrived earlier, stayed later, and took on more than necessary. Afia noticed the change almost immediately. You've been quieter lately, her assistant observed gently one afternoon. Are you okay? Rosalind looked up from her laptop, expression neutral. I'm fine. Afia hesitated. You don't look fine. Rosalind offered a polite smile. I appreciate your concern, but I assure you everything is under control. It was the lie she repeated daily. But her body told a different story. Morning sickness worsened. Fatigue clung to her no matter how much rest she tried to get. She began wearing looser clothing to hide the subtle changes she wasn't ready for the world to see. Only one person knew the truth besides her doctor, her closest friend, Doreen. They sat together in Rosalind's living room one evening, the weight of confession still hanging heavy in the air. You're pregnant? Doreen had repeated, eyes wide. Yes. And the father is the luggage guy? His name is Osteine, Rosalind corrected softly. Doreen studied her friend's face, then sighed. Did you tell him? I did. And? Her silence was answer enough. Doreen's expression shifted to one of anger. He doubted you? Rosalind didn't respond. That's unfair, Doreen said firmly. You didn't get pregnant alone. I know. Then why are you carrying this burden alone? Rosalind looked away. Because I can. Doreen reached across the table and took her hand. Just because you can doesn't mean you should. Meanwhile, Osteine couldn't escape the guilt. He tried distracting himself with work, with friends, with late-night outings that used to bring him comfort. None of it worked. Every quiet moment brought Rosalind's words back to him. One evening, he found himself standing outside the airport cafe where they'd shared that first drink. He didn't know why he'd come. Habit, maybe, or regret. He ordered a drink and sat alone, watching strangers pass by, people living their lives, unaware of the storm inside him. His phone buzzed unexpectedly. It was Ya. I heard you've been acting strange lately. Are you okay? He stared at the message for a long time before replying. Osteine. No, but I think I deserve that. She didn't respond immediately, and he didn't blame her. He had broken her heart once. He wasn't entitled to her concern now. He thought of Rosalind again, her composure, her honesty, her quiet strength. And suddenly, the fear that had once dominated his thoughts began to shift.
What if he wasn't being trapped? What if he was being given a chance? A chance to grow up, a chance to take responsibility, a chance to become more than the man who always ran away. He stood up abruptly, decision forming in his chest. He didn't know what the right words were yet. He didn't know how to fix the hurt he had caused. But he knew one thing clearly. Silence was no longer an option.
Osteine did not sleep that night. He lay on his bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying everything. Roselyn's calm voice in his memory, her short, honest messages, the quiet dignity with which she had handled his doubt. The more he thought about it, the heavier his chest became. He had always believed strength meant independence, that responsibility was a chain designed to trap men into lives they were not ready for. But now, in the silence of his room, he began to understand something different. Strength was not running away. Strength was standing still when fear told you to move. By dawn, he had made up his mind. He was going to see Roselyn. Roselyn sat behind her office desk later that morning, reviewing financial projections for a new international partnership. Her face was composed, her voice steady as she instructed her executives through a video conference. No one could tell that her heart was heavy. No one could see how every morning she fought nausea in the bathroom before putting on her flawless makeup, or how every night she lay awake wondering what kind of future awaited her unborn child. When the meeting ended, she leaned back in her chair and closed her eyes briefly. "Ma'am," Afia said softly from the doorway, "there's someone here to see you." Roselyn frowned. "Is he scheduled?" "No," Afia replied, "but he insists it's important. His name is Osteine." The name struck her like a sudden wind. Her heart skipped, then hardened. She opened her eyes slowly. "This is a workplace," she said coolly. "You have 5 minutes." He nodded. "That's all I need." The silence between them was thick. "I was wrong," he began. She folded her arms. "You'll need to be more specific." He swallowed. "I was wrong to doubt you, wrong to disappear, wrong to treat something this serious like an inconvenience." Her jaw tightened, but she said nothing. "I panicked. I thought my life was ending. But the truth is, I was just afraid of growing up." She let out a bitter laugh. "You didn't have to grow up alone, Osteine. You just had to be honest." "I know. Instead, you made me feel like a liar." Pain flickered across his face. "I'm sorry." Silence stretched. Finally, she asked, "Why are you here now?" "Because I can't change what I did, but I can change what I do next." Her eyes softened only slightly. "And what exactly is that?" "I want to take responsibility. For the child, for my actions, for everything." She studied him carefully. Responsibility is not a word, it's a lifetime of choices. "I'm ready to make them." She turned away, walking to the window. The city sprawled below, busy, powerful, indifferent. "You think showing up erases weeks of silence?" she asked quietly. "No," he replied, "but I hope it starts something better than nothing." She closed her eyes briefly. When she turned back to him, her voice was steady but tired. "I didn't come looking for you because I wanted money or marriage or protection. I know. I told you because it was right. And I disrespected that." "Yes, you did." He took a step forward. "Give me a chance to make it right." She shook her head slightly. "I don't know if I can trust you." "I'll learn it." His sincerity in his voice unsettled her more than anger ever could. "You can't walk in and become a hero overnight." "I'm not trying to be a hero, just a man who stays." Her phone buzzed on her desk, interrupting the moment. She ignored it.
This child will grow up knowing who their mother is. Strong, independent, unbreakable. And their father? He asked quietly. She hesitated. That depends on you. Word spread quickly through Accra's elite circles when Roselyn's pregnancy became noticeable. Whispers filled charity events. Curious glances followed her into boardrooms. Headlines nearly broke before she paid media outlets to maintain her privacy. Some admired her courage, others judged her silently. She's too successful to be careless, some said. She probably planned it, others speculated. Roselyn ignored them all. But deep inside, loneliness crept in. Osteine, to his credit, did not disappear again. He began showing up quietly. Doctor's appointments, prenatal classes, short messages asking how she felt. He never demanded affection, never assumed forgiveness. He waited. And that patience slowly began to shift something inside her. One evening, months later, as rain drummed softly against her windows, she invited him inside after a hospital checkup. They sat on opposite ends of her sofa. The doctor says the baby is healthy. He smiled. That's good. She hesitated. It's a girl. His breath caught slightly. A daughter. Yes. He looked down at his hands. I promise I won't fail her. Roselyn watched him closely. This isn't about promises, it's about consistency. I'll be here. She nodded slowly. For the first time since the airport incident, she felt something close to peace. Not love, not yet, but possibility.
The months that followed were unlike anything Roselyn had ever experienced. Pregnancy, she discovered, was not just a physical journey. It was emotional, mental, and deeply spiritual. Every day brought a new wave of change, her body, her thoughts, her priorities, and unexpectedly, her heart. Osteine's presence became a quiet constant in her life. He didn't overwhelm her with grand gestures. Instead, he did small, consistent things that spoke louder than apologies ever could. He brought her ginger tea when morning sickness returned. He sat silently beside her during long hospital waits. He read articles about pregnancy late at night and sent her thoughtful messages in the morning. He learned how to listen without interrupting, without defending himself, without making excuses. Roselyn noticed everything. At first, she told herself she was simply tolerating him for the sake of the child. But as weeks passed, she began to acknowledge the truth she was reluctant to face. She was beginning to trust him again. One Saturday afternoon, they attended a prenatal class together. Roselyn sat upright, composed as ever, while Osteine fidgeted slightly beside her, looking out of place among the other couples who already seemed bonded by shared excitement. The instructor smiled warmly. Parenthood is not about perfection, it's about presence. Children don't need flawless parents, they need committed ones. The words struck something deep in Osteine. He glanced at Roselyn and wondered how someone so strong could carry such heavy burdens with so little complaint. During a break, one of the women in the class approached Roselyn. "You glow," she said kindly. "Is this your first?" "Yes," Roselyn replied. "And your husband?" the woman asked casually, looking at Osteine. There was a pause, brief but noticeable. Osteine stiffened slightly, waiting. Roselyn glanced at him. "He's the father," she said carefully. "Not husband, not partner, just father." Osteine understood the weight of those words. Later, as they walked back to their cars, he spoke quietly. "You didn't have to answer that." "I didn't lie," she said calmly. "No, you didn't." A silence followed. "I'm not asking for a title," he added. "I know I haven't earned anything." Roselyn stopped walking and looked at him fully. This is not about earning affection like a reward. This is about rebuilding something that was broken. He nodded. "I understand. And rebuilding takes time. I'm not in a hurry. For the first time in my life, I'm willing to wait."
Her gaze softened slightly. Public pressure grew as her pregnancy became impossible to hide. Business blogs began speculating. Social media influencers whispered. Some journalists tried to dig into her private life, hoping to uncover scandal. CEO pregnant without husband? One headline teased, before her legal team shut it down. Her board of directors, though respectful, began expressing subtle concern. Public perception matters, one executive said cautiously during a meeting. Investors like stability. Roselyn's response was sharp and unwavering. My personal life is not a measure of my competence. The company's success speaks for itself. No one dared challenge her further. But inside, the pressure weighed on her. One evening, after a particularly long day, she sat on her balcony, exhaustion etched across her face. Osteine, who had come by to drop off some groceries, noticed immediately. "You look tired," he said gently. "I am." He hesitated, then sat across from her. "Do you want to talk about it?" She studied him for a moment. Months ago, she would have dismissed the question. Now, something in his tone felt safe. "People are watching, judging, waiting for me to make a mistake." "You're allowed to be human," he said quietly. She let out a soft, humorless laugh. "The world doesn't seem to agree." He leaned forward slightly. "Then let the world talk. You're carrying a child. You're running a company. You're surviving disappointment. That's not weakness, Roselyn. That's strength." The sincerity in his voice settled something deep inside her. "Thank you," she said softly. The day of the baby shower arrived sooner than she expected. Doreen, Afia, and a small circle of trusted friends organized a private celebration at Roselyn's home. Soft music filled the air, laughter replaced tension, and for a few hours, Roselyn allowed herself to simply enjoy the moment. Osteine arrived quietly, holding a small gift bag. "I wasn't sure if I should come," he admitted when he found her in the garden. "You were invited," she reminded him. He handed her the gift. Inside was a tiny pair of baby shoes, white, delicate, and impossibly small. "For our daughter," he said quietly. The words felt natural this time. Our daughter. Roselyn's eyes lingered on the shoes longer than she expected. "She's real," he continued softly. "She's not just an idea anymore. She's a person, a life, and I want to be someone she can be proud of." Roselyn looked up at him. "And are you becoming that person?" she asked. He met her gaze without hesitation. "Every day." Something shifted between them in that moment, not dramatic, not explosive, but real. Later that night, as guests began to leave and the house grew quiet, Roselyn stood alone in the nursery she had carefully prepared. Soft cream walls, a white crib, shelves lined with books she hoped her daughter would someday love. Osteine appeared in the doorway. "It's beautiful," he said. "I want her to grow up knowing she is safe." "She will," he said. "With you, she already has more than most children ever get." Roselyn turned to him. "And with you?" He took a breath. "If you let me." The honesty in his voice lingered in the air. She didn't answer immediately, but she didn't tell him to leave either. And in that silence, something fragile but hopeful began to grow.
Roselyn had always believed that if she could control her world tightly enough, nothing would ever truly surprise her again. But pregnancy had a way of humbling even the most disciplined hearts. It stripped her of illusions of complete control and replaced them with something far more vulnerable, the realization that her choices now stretched beyond herself. The morning sickness had eased, but emotional turbulence had not. It was during a quiet Sunday morning that the next unexpected twist arrived. Her mother. Madame Osteine Adjei had not been an absent mother, but she had always been distant. After the death of Roselyn's father, grief had reshaped the household into something more formal than familial. Love was shown through provision, not conversation. Expectations were high, vulnerability was rare. So when Roselyn's housekeeper announced that her mother had arrived unannounced, Roselyn felt an old, familiar tension settled in her chest.
"She's in the sitting room, ma'am." Rosalind inhaled slowly. "Thank you." She walked into the room and found her mother seated elegantly, posture perfect as always, her handbag resting neatly on her lap. "Good morning, Mother." Madame Evelyn looked up, her eyes scanning Rosalind in a way that felt both loving and assessing. Her gaze lingered briefly on Rosalind's growing belly before she stood and pulled her daughter into a brief but firm embrace. "You should have told me earlier," she said quietly. Rosalind blinked. "Told you what?" "That you were going through this alone." "I'm not alone," Rosalind replied automatically. Her mother pulled back slightly. "Then where is the man responsible?" The question hung heavy between them. Rosalind hesitated. "He is around." "Around is not a commitment," Madame Evelyn said calmly, "and you were not raised to accept half-effort from anyone." Rosalind felt that familiar ache of never quite measuring up. "His name is Osteine," she said. "He's trying." Her mother studied her for a long moment. "Trying is a beginning, but consistency is proof." Rosalind exhaled softly. "I know." There was a pause. "Do you love him?" her mother asked. The question caught Rosalind off guard. "I don't know," she admitted honestly. "Not yet." Madame Evelyn nodded slowly. "Then protect your heart, but do not deny your child the chance of knowing both parents, if he is willing to show up properly." Rosalind absorbed the words quietly. Before she could respond, the doorbell rang. Her heart jumped unexpectedly. The housekeeper appeared again. "Ma'am, Mr. Osteine is here." Rosalind turned toward her mother. "This might be awkward." Madame Evelyn's expression remained composed. "Let him come in." Osteine had not planned to meet Rosalind's mother that day. He stood in the doorway, suddenly aware of how small he felt under the weight of the older woman's gaze. She didn't smile, she didn't frown, she simply observed him with the same intensity Rosalind used in board meetings. "So," Madame Evelyn said calmly, "you are the man connected to my daughter's situation." Osteine swallowed. "Yes, ma'am." Rosalind winced slightly at the phrasing. Madame Evelyn gestured for him to sit. "Then sit." He obeyed. "It will be direct," she continued. "What are your intentions?" The question struck hard, but he did not flinch. "My intention," he said carefully, "is to be present, fully, not because I am forced, but because I choose to be so." Madame Evelyn studied him. "You chose to doubt her." He nodded slowly. "Yes, ma'am, and that is a mistake I will regret for the rest of my life." Rosalind glanced at him, surprised by the honesty. Silence filled the room. "What has changed?" Madame Evelyn asked. "I have," he replied. "I was afraid, immature, running from responsibility, but this child has forced me to confront who I really am." Madame Evelyn leaned back slightly. "And who are you now?" "A man who wants to do better than he has before." The older woman's gaze softened just slightly. "I do not need poetry, I need proof." "You will have it," Osteine replied quietly. Rosalind watched the exchange with a mixture of admiration and fear, two strong forces colliding in her living room, both claiming to care about her in different ways. After a long pause, Madame Evelyn stood. "I will not interfere in whatever arrangement you two choose, but understand this, if my daughter sheds another tear because of you, I will not be kind about it." Osteine met her eyes. "That is fair." After her mother left, Rosalind and Osteine stood in the quiet that followed. "That went better than expected," he said gently. Rosalind let out a small breath. "She didn't throw you out." "That feels like progress." She studied him for a moment. "You didn't have to come today." "I wanted to," he said. "I want to stop showing up only when it's convenient." Her heart shifted slightly at the sincerity. They sat together on the sofa, a rare, comfortable silence settling between them. "My mother asked me something earlier," Rosalind said quietly. "What?" "She asked if I love you." Osteine didn't react immediately. He didn't smile, he didn't retreat. "What did you say?" he asked softly. "I don't know." He nodded. "That's honest." She turned toward him. "Does that bother you?" He thought for a moment. "It would bother me if you lied, but the truth, no, because love isn't something I expect you to feel just because I showed up late." Her chest tightened unexpectedly. "And you," she asked, "what do you feel?" He hesitated, not because he lacked an answer, but because he respected the weight of the moment. "I feel grateful," he said slowly. "Grateful that you didn't shut me out completely. Grateful that I get to witness this journey with you. And hopeful that one day you might see me not just as the man who failed you once, but the man who stayed." The honesty in his words lingered long after he stopped speaking. That night, as Rosalind lay in bed with her hand resting gently on her belly, she realized something had shifted again. Not trust, not love, but something just as powerful. She no longer felt like she was walking this road alone.
By the time Roselyn entered her third trimester, change was no longer something she could ignore. It was something she had to accept. Her body had changed, her routine had changed, her priorities had shifted in ways she had never imagined. But most of all, her heart had changed. She no longer flinched when Osteine reached for her hand to steady her on uneven steps. She no longer questioned his presence at every appointment. She no longer told herself she was only tolerating him for the sake of the child. The truth was simpler and scarier. She was beginning to care for him, deeply. The first time the world began to notice, it happened at a charity gala. Roselyn had not wanted to attend. Her energy was low, her back ached, and the weight of public scrutiny felt heavier than ever. But the event supported a foundation her late father had helped establish, and that made it non-negotiable. She stood in front of her bedroom mirror, dressed in a flowing navy gown that complemented her pregnancy rather than hiding it. Her makeup was subtle, her hair pulled back with elegance. Osteine waited downstairs. When she descended the staircase, he turned at the sound of her footsteps and froze. For a moment, he simply stared. "You look," he began, then stopped, searching for the right word. Roselyn raised an eyebrow slightly. "Professional?" "Powerful," he corrected. "And beautiful." The compliment wasn't exaggerated. It wasn't performative. It was honest. Her cheeks warmed slightly. "Thank you." He stepped closer. "Are you sure you want to go? We can still cancel." She shook her head. "No, I won't hide." He nodded, respect in his eyes. "Then I'll stand with you." The words were simple, but they meant everything. The ballroom buzzed with conversation as Roselyn entered. Heads turned, conversations paused, eyes followed her movement across the room. Some gazes were admiring, others were curious, a few were judgmental. This time, she didn't care. What she did notice, however, was the subtle shift when Osteine stepped beside her and gently offered his arm. The message was clear to everyone watching. She was not alone. "Is that her partner?" someone whispered. "They look serious," another murmured. Roselyn heard it all, and for once she didn't feel the urge to correct them. Throughout the evening, Osteine remained close, but never intrusive. He greeted guests politely, stepped back when business conversations demanded Roselyn's full attention, and reappeared when her posture revealed fatigue. More than once, she caught people observing them with curiosity. "Let them watch," she thought. "This is my life." Near the end of the evening, an older woman approached them, a respected investor and long-time family acquaintance. "Roselyn," she greeted warmly. Her gaze shifted to Osteine. "You didn't introduce your companion." Roselyn hesitated only briefly. "This is Osteine.
He's family. The words surprised even her. Family. Osteine's breath caught slightly, but he said nothing. He simply nodded politely, eyes shining with emotion he tried to hide. The woman smiled. "It's good to see you supported." As she walked away, a quiet stillness lingered between them. "You didn't have to say that," Osteine said gently. Roselyn looked up at him. "I know. Did you mean it?" She held his gaze. "Yes." Later that night, they sat on her balcony, the city lights glowing softly below. "I've spent most of my life proving that I don't need anyone," Roselyn said quietly. "You've done that very well," Osteine replied. "But I'm starting to realize—" She paused, choosing her words carefully. "Needing someone is not the same as being weak." He nodded. "Sometimes it's the bravest thing you can admit." She turned toward him. "I'm still afraid." "Of me?" he asked gently. "Of trusting too much, of hoping too deeply." He considered her words. "Then we'll take it slowly as you need." She studied him for a long moment. "You've changed. So have you." "Do you ever resent me?" she asked quietly, "for how difficult I've been?" He shook his head. "No, I respect you more because of it. You didn't make this easy. You made it real." Her hand rested gently over her belly. "She'll arrive soon." "Our daughter," he said softly. This time, she didn't correct him. The baby's movements grew stronger with each passing day. Sleepless nights increased. Nesting instincts took over. Everything began to feel urgent. Osteine became more involved than ever. He attended parenting workshops. He learned how to install the car seat properly. He practiced holding a baby doll until it felt less awkward. He memorized emergency contacts. He read bedtime stories aloud to Roselyn's belly. Sometimes she watched him from the doorway of the nursery, overwhelmed by a feeling she could no longer deny. This man is becoming a father, not out of obligation, but out of love. One evening, as they folded tiny baby clothes together, Osteine spoke quietly. "Do you ever think about what comes after? After she's born?" "Yes, after the chaos, after the adjustments, after everything changes. I think about stability, about peace." He nodded slowly. "Do you think we could ever have that?" Roselyn met his eyes. "I think," she said carefully, "we are already building it." His expression softened. "And us? Not just as parents, but as something more?" Her heartbeat quickened. "I don't have all the answers," she admitted, "but I know this. You are no longer a stranger who disrupted my life." "What am I now?" he asked gently. She held his gaze. "You are someone I trust, someone I respect, someone I care for." The words settled between them, fragile but sincere. For Osteine, they were enough, for now. Outside, the world continued its gossip, its judgments, its speculation. But inside that home, inside that quiet space between two people who had stumbled into each other's lives by accident and stayed by choice, something real was forming. Not perfect, not flawless, but honest. And sometimes, honesty was the strongest foundation of all.
By the time the 9th month arrived, time itself seemed to slow down. Every step Roselyn took was deliberate. Every breath required effort. Sleep came in short, restless fragments. Her world had shrunk into small, intimate moments, counting baby kicks, timing contractions that weren't yet real, double-checking hospital bags. And yet,
beneath the physical discomfort, there was something else, a quiet, emotional tension, a feeling that something was approaching, not just the birth of her child, but a turning point in her life. It started on a Tuesday evening. Rain poured heavily outside, thunder rolling across the sky with a force that made even the walls seem to tremble. Roselyn sat in the living room, trying to focus on a book she'd already reread twice, while Osteine prepared tea in the kitchen. "You're pacing again," he called gently. She sighed. "I can't help it." He walked in with 2 cups, handing one to her carefully. "Try to rest. The doctor said stress doesn't help." She looked up at him with tired eyes. "You think I don't know that?" He softened immediately. "That's not what I meant." Silence stretched between them. Pregnancy had brought them closer, but it had also revealed the cracks neither of them could ignore. Fear, uncertainty, unspoken questions. He sat beside her. "Talk to me." She hesitated, then finally said the truth she'd been holding back. "I'm scared, Osteine." "Of the delivery?" "Of everything," she admitted. "Of doing this wrong, of trusting too much, of building a life around something that might collapse again." His chest tightened. "You think I'll disappear again?" "She don't know," she said honestly. "You proved you can change, but you also proved once that you could walk away." The words stung, but he understood why she said them. "You're right," he said quietly. "I did that, and I hate myself for it." She turned toward him. "Then why should I believe that this time is different?" He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he reached for her hand slowly, as though giving her time to pull away if she wanted. She didn't. "This time is different," he said, "because last time I was running from responsibility. Now I'm running toward it." Her breath trembled. "And if you fail?" she asked. "Then I'll admit it, and I'll correct it, and I'll keep trying." The honesty in his voice broke something open inside her. Later that night, after he had gone home, Roselyn lay awake in bed, hand resting on her belly. "You hear that?" she whispered softly. "Your father is stubborn, but he's trying." The baby kicked in response, as if agreeing. Roselyn smiled through tears. For the first time, she allowed herself to imagine something she had never dared to before. A family. Not a perfect one, not a storybook one, but a real one. The call came 2 days later. It was past midnight. Osteine's phone rang sharply in the darkness of his apartment, jerking him awake. He answered immediately. "Rosalind?" Her voice was strained, breathless, different. I think it's time." His heart stopped for half a second. "I'm coming," he said instantly. "Stay on the line." He grabbed his keys, barely remembering to lock the door as he rushed to his car. The streets were slick with rain, but he drove carefully, his mind focused on only one thing. Don't be late. Don't fail her again. By the time he reached her house, she was leaning against the doorway, one hand gripping the wall, the other pressing against her belly. Pain etched across her face. Hey, I've got you," he said gently, sliding an arm around her. "I hate this. I hate not being in control." He helped her into the car carefully. "You don't have to control this. You just have to get through it." She nodded weakly. The hospital was bright, sterile, and overwhelming. Nurses moved quickly. Doctors spoke calmly. Everything felt unreal. Osteine never left her side. He held her hand through every contraction. He wiped her tears. He whispered encouragement when she felt like she couldn't continue. He reminded her to breathe when pain stole her focus. At one point, exhausted and trembling, she looked up at him with tears streaming down her face. "Don't leave me," she whispered. The words shattered him. "Never," he said firmly. "Not again. Not ever." Hours passed. Time blurred. Then finally, a cry filled the room. Small, powerful, life-altering. The nurse smiled. "It's a healthy baby girl." Roselyn's world collapsed and rebuilt itself in a single breath. They placed the baby in her arms,
tiny and warm and perfect. Roselyn stared down at her daughter, overwhelmed with love so fierce it terrified her. "She's here," she whispered. Osteine stood beside her, tears silently sliding down his face as he looked at the child. "Our daughter," he said softly. This time, the words were not just hopeful, they were real. Rosalind looked up at him, eyes filled with emotion. "You stayed," she said quietly. "I will always stay," he replied. In that hospital room, under the soft glow of overhead lights, something shifted irrevocably. Not just between them, but within them. They were no longer two strangers bound by accident. They were parents. They were connected. They were becoming something more. The first weeks after the baby's birth passed in a blur Roselyn could barely explain. Days and nights lost their meaning. Sleep became something rare and precious. Time was measured not by clocks, but by feeding schedules, gentle cries, and the slow rhythm of a tiny life adjusting to the world. They named her Eliana. It was a name Roselyn had whispered to herself long before she'd told anyone else she was pregnant. It meant light, and somehow it felt exactly right. Osteine Adjei-Mensah. Even writing the double surname on the birth certificate had felt symbolic. Not a contract, not a promise, just an acknowledgement of shared responsibility. Shared life. Osteine moved into the guest room of Roselyn's house 2 weeks after the birth. Not because she asked him to, but because one night, as Eliana cried endlessly and Roselyn stood in the nursery fighting tears of her own, he appeared in the doorway and said gently, "You shouldn't be doing this alone." She didn't argue. She was too tired to build walls anymore. He brought order into the chaos. He learned the rhythm of Eliana's cries, the difference between hunger, discomfort, and simple need for comfort. He mastered diaper changes faster than Roselyn expected. He took over midnight rocking duties when he saw exhaustion settle into her bones. "You need rest," he would insist. "Let me handle this one." At first, she resisted. "I can manage." "I know you can," he would reply calmly, "but you don't have to." That distinction slowly reshaped everything. One afternoon, while Roselyn slept on the couch with Eliana curled against her chest, Osteine sat nearby watching them. The house was quiet, peaceful. He studied Roselyn's face, the lines of exhaustion, yes, but also the gentleness he had never seen in her before. Motherhood had softened her in the most powerful way. He realized, with startling clarity, that his feelings had evolved into something deeper than gratitude, deeper than responsibility, deeper than admiration. He was in love with her. Not with the idea of her, not with the role she played in his life, but with the woman herself, her strength, her stubbornness, her honesty, her resilience. And the realization both filled him with warmth and terrified him, because love meant risk, and he had already hurt her once. Roselyn, meanwhile, was changing too. Motherhood stripped away the last layers of emotional armor she hadn't realized she still wore. Eliana needed presence, warmth, openness, and slowly those needs began reshaping how Roselyn loved everyone else too. She began noticing the quiet things Osteine did when he thought no one was watching. The way he kissed Eliana's forehead every morning before leaving for work, the way he studied parenting videos late at night, the way he asked her opinions on even the smallest decisions, as though honoring her voice mattered, the way he never once complained about the role he had stepped into. One evening, after putting Eliana to sleep, Roselyn found Osteine sitting in the nursery chair, just watching the crib. "You've been staring at her for 10 minutes, she observed gently. He didn't look away. "I'm trying to understand how something so small can change everything so completely." She leaned against the doorway. "You're doing well." He turned to her. "You mean that?" "Yes," she said honestly. "You've been consistent." He smiled faintly. "I promised that much." She hesitated, then added, "And more." He searched her face. More? You're not just showing up because you feel obligated, you're showing up because you want to. He didn't deny it. And that matters, she finished softly. The silence that followed felt different from all the silences they'd shared before. Warmer, safer. The world outside had begun to notice the change, too. Public appearances slowly resumed. Roselyn returned to work part-time, and whenever she attended events, Osteine accompanied her, not as a shadow, not as an accessory, but as a partner in presence. Media speculation shifted. CEO and mystery man now co-parenting? Is love blossoming after scandal? Power couple emerging in Accra's elite circles? Roselyn didn't comment. For the first time in her life, she truly didn't care what anyone else thought. Her life felt full. Messy, exhausting, unpredictable, but full. The moment that changed everything came unexpectedly. It was a quiet Sunday afternoon. Rain fell lightly outside, the kind that soothed rather than disturbed. Eliana slept peacefully in her crib. Roselyn and Osteine sat at the dining table, sharing a late lunch. "You've been quiet today," Roselyn noted. He smiled slightly. "I've been thinking." "That's rarely harmless," he laughed softly. "Fair point." She studied him. "About what?" He hesitated, then decided honesty was the only path he knew how to walk anymore. "About us." Her heart shifted. "What about us?" she asked gently. He met her gaze fully. No jokes, no deflection. "I know I don't deserve anything beyond what you're already giving me. Your trust, your patience, your willingness to let me be part of this life." Roselyn didn't interrupt. "But I also know," he continued, "that I don't want this to just be about co-parenting or convenience or history." Her breath caught slightly. "I want this to be about choice," he said quietly. "About choosing you every day, not because of Eliana, but because of you." Silence filled the space between them. Not heavy, not fearful, just real. Roselyn folded her hands slowly. "That's a serious thing to say." "I know. And you once walked away when things became serious." "I did, and I will spend the rest of my life proving that I am not that man anymore." The vulnerability in his eyes disarmed her more than any grand gesture ever could. She looked away briefly, gathering her thoughts. Then she said softly, "I'm still learning how to trust the life we're building. That's fair. I'm still afraid of losing control. That's human." She turned back to him. "But," he waited, "but I no longer feel afraid of you." The words landed between them like a quiet miracle. His voice was barely above a whisper. "That means more than you know." She exhaled slowly. "I don't know what the future looks like." "I don't know either," he said, "but I know I want to face it with you." She didn't respond immediately. Instead, she reached across the table and took his hand, not out of habit, not out of need, but out of choice. And for Osteine, that was everything. That night, after Roselyn fell asleep with Eliana nestled beside her, Osteine stood alone on the balcony. The city lights glowed softly. The world felt vast and uncertain, but his heart felt clear. He had made many mistakes in his life, but walking away from Roselyn was the worst, and coming back had been the most important. He didn't know exactly how he would do it yet, he didn't know when, but one truth had settled firmly inside him. He didn't just want to be part of this family, he wanted to commit to it, fully, forever. And slowly, quietly, with the same care he had learned through parenting, a plan began to form in his mind.
The morning Osteine decided to propose did not arrive with fireworks or dramatic certainty. It arrived quietly, with the soft hum of the coffee machine, with Eliana's gentle babbling from her crib, with the realization that peace, real peace, had already taken root in his life. He stood by the nursery doorway, watching Roselyn lift their daughter gently from the crib. Her movements were instinctive now, fluid, with a tenderness that still amazed him. She pressed a kiss to Eliana's cheek and smiled when the baby giggled in response. It was a simple moment, and yet it felt like everything. This was not chaos. This was not fear. This was not running. This was home. And he knew with absolute clarity that he did not want to keep standing on the edges of this life, grateful just to be allowed inside it. He wanted to belong to it. Officially, deliberately, by choice. Roselyn noticed the change in him before he said anything. There was a calm in his eyes she hadn't seen before, a groundedness, like a man who had finally stopped questioning whether he deserved happiness and started acting like someone determined to protect it. "You're unusually quiet today," she said later that afternoon as they sat on the terrace watching Eliana sleep in her stroller. "Am I?" he asked lightly. "Yes," she replied, "the thoughtful kind of quiet." He smiled faintly. "That's dangerous, isn't it?" She studied him. "Depends on what you're thinking about." He looked at her then, really looked at her, and something in his gaze made her breath catch. "You," he said simply. Her heart shifted. He didn't propose immediately, not because he was unsure, but because he wanted to be certain that when he did, it would not feel like pressure. Not because of the baby, not because of the public, not because of expectations, but because of love. So he waited. He waited through ordinary days and extraordinary moments alike. Through laughter over spilled baby food, through exhaustion, through small arguments about parenting styles, through quiet evenings on the couch when Eliana finally slept and the house exhaled with them. And in every moment, the truth only deepened. He was not staying because he had to. He was staying because he wanted to. Every day. The proposal came on Roselyn's birthday, exactly 1 year after the night their lives had collided through a simple luggage mix-up. She hadn't expected anything special. Motherhood had shifted her priorities. Grand celebrations felt less important now. But that evening, Osteine suggested a quiet dinner at home. "Just us," he said, "and Eliana, obviously." She smiled. "Our most demanding guest." He chuckled. "Our most important one." The house was softly lit. Candles glowed on the dining table. A gentle playlist filled the background. Nothing extravagant, just thoughtful, intentional. Roselyn looked around as she sat. "You planned all this?" "Yes," he said simply. "You didn't have to." "I wanted to." The words felt familiar now, comforting. They ate slowly, reminiscing about the strange, painful, beautiful journey that had brought them here. "You know," Roselyn said thoughtfully, "if we hadn't mixed up that luggage, we might never have met," Osteine finished. "Or we might have met later, under different circumstances." "Do you think it would have worked?" he asked. She considered the question. "Not then." He nodded. "I agree." "Too much pride," she added. "Too much fear," he admitted. She looked at him gently. "But now?" He met her gaze. "Now we chose to grow." Silence settled between them, not awkward, but full of meaning, full of everything they had survived. After dinner, Osteine stood and walked toward the shelf near the window. "I have something for you," he said quietly. Roselyn frowned slightly. "Another gift? You already did too much." He turned back towards her, holding a small velvet box in his hand. Her breath stopped. Time seemed to pause. He didn't kneel immediately. Instead, he walked closer, his expression calm, grounded, sincere. "Roselyn," he said softly, "I have made many mistakes in my life. The worst of them was doubting you when you showed me nothing but honesty." Her chest tightened. "I don't stand here today pretending to be perfect.
I stand here as a man who has learned, who has grown, who has chosen this life, this family, this love, intentionally." Tears welled in her eyes. "You did not owe me a second chance. You did not owe me trust. You did not owe me space in your world, but you gave it anyway." He finally knelt. "Not because of Eliana, though she is the greatest gift we will ever share." He opened the box, revealing a simple, elegant ring. "But because of you, because I love you, because I choose you, because I want to spend my life showing you every day that I am no longer the man that walked away, but the man who stayed, who built, who stood beside you." Tears streamed freely now. "Roselyn Adjei, will you marry me? Not out of obligation, not out of pressure, but out of choice, out of partnership, out of love." The room felt impossibly still. Her mind flashed through everything: the airport, the luggage, the fear, the heartbreak, the pregnancy, the labor, the nights he stayed, the mornings he showed up, the countless small ways he had rebuilt what he once broke. She realized something profound in that moment. Love had not arrived like a storm. It had arrived like consistency, like presence, like patience, like growth, like choice. She looked at him, this man who had once been a stranger, then a disappointment, then a co-parent, then a partner in every way that mattered. And finally, truth settled clearly in her heart. "I love you too," she whispered. He froze, emotion flooding his face. "Do you?" he asked, softly, almost afraid to believe it. "Yes," she said, voice trembling. "Not because you were perfect, but because you were real, because you chose to grow, because you stayed." She reached for his hand. "And because I choose you too." Tears escaped freely now. "So, is that a yes?" he asked, smiling through emotion. She laughed softly through her tears. "Yes, Osteine, it's a yes." He slipped the ring on her finger with trembling hands, then pulled her gently into his arms, not with urgency, not with possession, but with reverence, with gratitude, with love. Eliana stirred in her crib and let out a small sound. Roselyn pulled back slightly, smiling. "I think she has opinions about this." Osteine laughed softly. "Already supervising our lives." They walked together into the nursery. Roselyn lifted Eliana gently, holding her close. "We have news for you, little light. Your parents are choosing each other." Osteine stood beside them, overwhelmed by the sight. This was not the life he had planned. It was better. The wedding was small, intentional. No media circus, no grand spectacle, just family, close friends, genuine smiles. Roselyn walked down the aisle with grace, strength, and a peace that radiated from within. Osteine waited for her with steady eyes and a heart that knew without question that this was the greatest honor of his life. When they exchanged vows, there were no rehearsed speeches, just truth. "I promise to keep choosing you," Roselyn said softly. "And I promise to keep becoming the man worthy of that choice," Osteine replied. Eliana gurgled happily from Doreen's arms, as though blessing the moment. Years later, when people asked how they met, Roselyn would smile softly and say, "Through a mistake," and Osteine would add, "Through fate." But what they both knew, what truly mattered, is that the story survived not because of the accident, but because of the choice to grow, the choice to stay, the choice to forgive, the choice to love. They did not live in perfection. They lived in honesty, in effort, in peace. And together, with Eliana between them, laughter filling their home,
trust anchoring their hearts, Roselyn and Osteine built what neither of them had planned, but both of them had chosen: a family, a partnership, a love that endured, not by chance, but by commitment. The end.